We're going to start with a keynote by Tom Friedman. He'll be presenting first. Please give him a nice, warm round of applause.
Thank you very much. Get some water ready. We still have water. John, thank you very much. Thanks to the Nature Conservancy. Thank you all for coming out. What I'm going to do is try to frame our discussion today with a little bit wider lens than just the climate, but locate the climate in it, because you won't really understand how I think about the world, and unless you, I think, see it through this much broader perspective. My work is really informed by one of my teachers, Lynn Wells, who taught me a long time ago, never think in the box, never think out of the box. Today you must think without a box. And that's exactly how I look at the world. Whether I'm looking at American politics, local politics, geopolitics, or the climate issue, I'm actually always arbitraging together three perspectives at once. And what I want to begin this morning with is show you those three perspectives, and then show you how they inform how I think about the question of climate, community, geopolitics, and ethics, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So when I look at the world today, what I basically see is that we're in the middle of three nonlinear accelerations all at the same time, with the three largest forces on the planet, which I call the market, Mother Nature, and Moore's Law. And to understand what's going on anywhere in the world, I think you have to bring these three perspectives together. So the Mother Nature for me is somebody want to help me here? There's no, there we go, thank you. Mother Nature for me is climate change, biodiversity loss, and population growth, particularly in the developing world today. If you put Mother Nature on a picture, well, she looks a little bit like Glacier National Park 1913 and Glacier National Park 2012. That glacier was actually there for 7,000 years. Put Mother Nature on a pictograph and she looks like Lake Chad 1963, and Lake Chad's that little blue smudge down there in 2013. Put Mother Nature on a graph and she actually looks like a giant accelerating hockey stick. This is a graph of global average temperature. Or she looks like another hockey stick, a graph of reported instances of extreme weather since 1988. Or she looks like the mother of all hockey sticks, a graph of global population growth throughout history. Put Mother Nature on any graph you want, and I will show you one giant accelerating hockey stick. Now, the market for me is globalization, but not your grandfather's globalization. That was actually containers on ships and planes. That's kind of flat, actually, today. What's globalizing the world today is actually digital globalization, where everything's being digitized and globalized through Facebook and PayPal and MOOCs and Twitter and the internet. Put digital globalization on a graph, and it looks like another hockey stick, total data consumed per month. Or it looks like another hockey stick, mobile cellular subscriptions in the United States or any country in the world, another hockey stick. Or it looks like another hockey stick, global internet users since 1996. The last hockey stick is Moore's Law, coined in 1965 by Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel. He posited that the speed and power of microchips would double roughly every 24 months, and the price would stay roughly the same. Put Moore's Law on a graph, looks like another giant hockey stick. Now, every year since 1965, someone's written a story in some magazine that says Moore's Law is over, Moore's Law is over, Moore's Law is over. And what all those authors have in common is they were all wrong. Moore's Law is alive and well. I suspect this PowerPoint is running on an Intel 14 nanometer chip. It has 35 million transistors per square millimeter. Your eye can't actually see it. Intel last year began shipping its 10 nanometer chip. It has 100 million transistors per square millimeter. And Intel can tell you exactly how they're going to make their 7 nanometer chip. Now, what's the difference between 35 million and 100 million? Very hard for the human mind actually to grasp the power of an exponential. It's actually the difference between a self-driving electric car that needs the entire trunk of the car to contain the brains of that car, and a self-driving car that needs a little box under the front seat. A few years ago, Intel, to demonstrate the power of the acceleration in Moore's law, actually asked their engineers if they could take a 1971 Volkswagen Beetle and calculate what if this Beetle had improved in all its dimensions the way microchips had since 1971. And Intel's engineers calculated that if it had, that Beetle today would go 300,000 miles an hour, it would get 2 million miles per gallon, and it would cost you 4 cents to buy. In fact, you'd be able to drive it your entire life on a single tank of gas. That is the power of the technological exponential involved in Moore's law. Now, my view of the world, and the way I look at everything, is that these three accelerating hockey sticks, these three exponentials, are all interweaving with one another. And they aren't just changing your world, they're reshaping your world. And really, you will not understand what's going on anywhere unless you draw in these three perspectives together. Now, another way of reframing my thesis is that we're actually in the middle of three climate changes at the same time. We're in the middle of a change of the climate of the climate. We're going from what I call later to now. So when I was growing up in Minnesota in the 50s and 60s, later was when I could clean that river, purify that lake, rescue that orangutan. I could do it now or I could do it later. Today, later is officially over. Later will now be too late. So whatever you're going to save, please save it now, because later is over. That's a climate change. We're actually going through a change in the climate of globalization. We're going from basically a world where, how to really phrase this? We're going from a world where we were really just interconnected to a world now where we're actually interdependent. That's a very, very different world. And actually we're heading for a world where we're going to be fused. So what do I mean? In an interdependent world, you get a complete geoeconomic inversion. Your friends start to be able to kill you faster than your enemies. Okay, first of all. So if Greek and Italian banks had gone under last night, I have a feeling that Nature Conservancy might have called me and said, Tom, we're gonna have to delay the start of this program. Greek and Italian banks went under last night. I'd say, wait a minute, Greek and Italian banks, they're in NATO, they're in the EU, but in an interdependent world, they can kill us. Had China taken 6 more islands in the South China Sea last night, I would not have lost any sleep. Had China lost 6% growth last night, I wouldn't have gone to sleep. Because in an interdependent world, you get another inversion. Your economic and geopolitical rivals falling becomes more dangerous than your rivals rising. That is a climate change. We're going from interconnected globalization to interdependent globalization. And thirdly, we're going through a change in the climate of technology and business. I'm a big believer that whatever can be done will be done. The only question is, will it be done by you or to you, by a bad guy or an enemy, and they're both always early adopters. So I'm always very attentive to what can be done technologically today. And what can be done today is every business can now sensorize, capture all the data around its business. It can then analyze that data and find the needle in the haystack of that data as the norm, not the exception. It can optimize off that data. It can prophesize off that data. You may have seen the ad for the IBM Watson repairman. He comes to a high-rise building, tells the doorman the elevator is broken. The doorman says it's not. The IBM Watson repairman says, I know, but it will be in 6 weeks and 3 days. You can now prophesize off that data. You can customize off that data just for guys from Minnesota with brown eyes and a mustache. You can localize off that data just for the Yale School of Management region. And you can digitize and automatize more jobs, products, and services off that data. You put all of those together, And there is not a business or institution that is not going through a climate change today. We're actually going through 3 climate changes at the same time. One in the climate, one in globalization, one in technology and business. So as I thought about that, I thought, who do I go, what do you want, actually, for starters? What do you want when the climate changes? I mean, that's the essential discussion we're having here. I think you want 2 things. You want resilience. You need to be able to take a blow because stuff happens when the climate changes. But you also want propulsion. You want to be moving ahead. You don't want John curled up in a ball under the desk here with me saying, John, come out, the climate change is over. Okay? So the more I thought about that, I thought, who do I go to for advice on how you get resilience and propulsion when the climate changes? And then I realized I knew this woman. She was 3.8 billion years old. Her name was Mother Nature, and she'd actually dealt with more climate changes than anybody. So I called her up, made an appointment, went out to see her. I said, Mother Nature, how do you produce resilience and propulsion when the climate changes? She said, well, Tom, I have to tell you, everything I do unconsciously, but these are my strategies. First of all, she said, I'm incredibly adaptive. In my world, Tom, it's not the strongest that survive. It's not the smartest that survive. It's the most adaptive that survive. And I teach that lesson through a process I call natural selection. You may have heard of it. Secondly, she said, I am incredibly entrepreneurial. Oh, Tom, I'm so entrepreneurial. Wherever I see a blank space in nature, I fill it with a plant or animal perfectly adapted to that niche. I'm incredibly entrepreneurial. Third, she said, I'm incredibly pluralistic. Oh, Tom, I'm the most diverse person you've ever met. I try 20 different species of everything. I see who wins. And she told me something really interesting. She said, Tom, I notice that my most diverse ecosystems are my most resilient and propulsive ecosystems. Oh, I love diversity, she said. Fourth, she said, I'm incredibly hybrid and heterodox in my thinking. Nothing dogmatic about me. I'll try any trees with any soils, any bees with any flowers. Nothing dogmatic about me. I'm very experimental. Fifth, she said, I'm totally open source. I let anyone fork off anywhere they want. I'm totally open source. Sixth, she said, I noticed that my healthiest ecosystems all build complex adaptive networks. So the elements of the ecosystem, by networking together, maximize their resilience and propulsion. Seventh, she said, I'm a lifelong learner, and I turn all my learning into DNA to pass on to the next generation. And lastly, though, she did say, Tom, I do believe in the laws of bankruptcy. I kill all my failures. I return them to the great manufacturer in the sky, and I take their energy to nourish my successes. So my argument, basically, is that Mother Nature's strategies for building resilience and propulsion are exactly the way we should think about community, politics, and business today. When you're in the middle of 3 climate changes at once, her strategies are actually the best teacher. And the countries, companies, communities, NGOs that most closely mirror Mother Nature's strategies for building resilience and propulsion when the climate changes, I believe is the one that will thrive in this age of acceleration. So she, for me, is so much more relevant as a teacher today than ever before. So with that framework, let me try to then zero in on 4 areas. We can talk about any of these more in detail about how you would go about building resilience and propulsion. Let me just say as an aside, I believe resilience and propulsion should be at the center of all our thinking today on politics. It's how I organize all my thoughts. And it's why in my last book, thank you for being late, I actually created a political party called Mother Nature's Political Party, and imagined what if she had run against Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in the 2016 election? What would her platform look like? What if we actually organized politics not on a left-right spectrum, but on a completely different grid governed by Mother Nature? But we'll leave that for later for the Q&A if you want to talk about that more. So let's talk about 4 areas in particular. How would I take this model, this kind of thinking, and apply it to how we build resilience and propulsion around the agenda of this organization, mitigating climate change? How would we build it around community? How would we apply it to countries? And how would we actually apply it to ethics? How do we get resilience and propulsion in all of those areas today? Well, on the question of climate, which is I realize, the center of this discussion, I would offer several approaches. The first thing for me, when I think about how you get resilience and propulsion around promoting mitigation of climate change, is that to name something is to own it. I'm a huge believer. To name something is to own it. If you can name the problem, you can own the problem. And one of the big problems, one of the big drawbacks for the climate community is that the people who named green originally were actually the people who hated it. And they named it liberal, sissy, girly man, unpatriotic, uncapitalistic, socialistic, vaguely European. Vaguely European. Mr. Gore, you're looking a little European to me. One of the things I've tried to do in my work, and certainly going back to Hot, Flat, and Crowded, is actually to rename green. To show people that green is actually patriotic, strategic, capitalistic, innovative. Green is the new red, white, and blue. Yeah, we need to own, we need to take back the language, because when you lose the language, I can tell you as a journalist and a columnist, when you lose the ability to think and frame a problem, you are so far behind the 8 ball. So that would be my number 1 suggestion for getting resilience propulsion around the climate agenda. Second is keep it simple. There's a tendency within the climate community to make things complicated. And I understand why, because they are complicated. But when you're trying to frame a debate, you do have to keep it simple. I'm a big fan of an essay that was written by the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England during the 2008 financial crisis, in which he asked a deeply, deeply profound question. Why are dogs better than human beings at catching a Frisbee? Now, I've puzzled over this for many years, okay? And his answer was, because they keep it simple. All they focus on is their angle at speed against this moving sphere. They keep it simple. So in my own thinking about climate mitigation, I try to keep it really simple. And my way of describing it is this. Climate mitigation and clean energy is a scale problem. If you do not have scale, you have a hobby. I like hobbies. I used to build model airplanes. I would not try to mitigate the climate as a hobby. If you don't have scale, you have nothing. And in my view, there's only one thing as big as Mother Nature, and that is Father Market, the marketplace. And if you aren't harnessing the power of the market for your ends, rather than clean, dirty, inefficient ends, you will never get scale. So I'm a huge fan of my friend Hal Harvey's 4 zeros, and I'm a huge fan of California's SB 100 program. SB 100, I think, is the model where you shape the market with the right incentives and the right goal. You simply say, our goal is by 2045, we are going to have emissions-free power in this state. You set metrics at every 10 years to get there. And then you tell the market, I don't care how you get there, as long as it's through clean, green electrons. And then that market and innovation take the way. I would be, if I were running for president, I'd be running on the 4 zeros. Zero waste manufacturing, zero net energy buildings, zero carbon transportation, and zero carbon electricity power generation. 4 zeros, 10-year signpost for how to get there by 2045, and then let the market take over. Keep it simple, harness it to the market. Every experience we have is when we've done that, we've reached our goals faster and farther than anyone predicted. My third point is that I learned this covering, I actually have another life. I cover the Middle East, and one of the things that you learn when you cover the Arab-Israeli conflict in particular your whole life is that when you want to make big change, you often have to get the right people to do the right thing for the wrong reasons. And if you wait for everyone to do everything for the right reasons, you actually can wait forever. So I'm always interested in how I get people to do the right thing for the wrong reasons sometimes. So when actually Hot, Flat, and Crowded came out in 2008, the reason why many of you didn't hear about it, the book actually came out in September 2008. It was number one on the New York Times bestseller list for 3 weeks. And then this bank called Lehman Brothers went under and took the economy and my book right with it. So I love still talking about it. So one of the things I did with that book was that my first speaking event around the book was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Because my view is very simple. If you can't sell your book to people who fundamentally disagree with it, you're never going to have scale. So I'm always thinking about so I actually took up the challenge of could I go into a room of Oklahoma, Texas, oil and gas people and make an argument for my book. And the way I approached them was this way. I said, look, I know some of you believe in climate change. Many of you don't. I do. Let's set that aside for a second. That's between you and your beach house, okay? But here's what I think. Here's what I think we can all believe in. I think we can all believe in math. And the UN population program tells us that by 2030, basically in another decade, there are going to be 1 billion more people on this planet. So think of every road, every airplane, every ocean fishery. There's going to be 1 billion more people here in 10 years. Now, if those 1 billion people all want to live in American-sized homes, eat American-sized Big Macs, and drive American-sized cars, we are going to burn up, choke up, heat up, and smoke up this planet far faster than Al Gore even predicted. So what does that mean? I said to them, that means clean energy, clean power, clean transport, clean buildings have to be the next great global industry. Otherwise, we're going to be a bad biological experiment. Well, who in this room believes America can have the world's leading economy in the next decade if we don't dominate the world's leading industry? Please raise your hand. That's an argument they have a little more difficulty with. And for those who even have difficulty with that, I explained to them that Dick Cheney argued that we had to go to war in Iraq if there was a 1% chance that Saddam Hussein could get a nuclear weapon that could destroy the planet. Well, I've got a problem that has about a 90% chance that it will destroy the planet. So my advice to you gentlemen, it was mostly gentlemen, is think like a dick and get behind climate change mitigation, okay? So sometimes you have to get people to do the right thing for the wrong reasons. But if you can break through, again, you can get scale. I think one of the other things that strikes me in listening to the video, and love the voices there, is we need to make climate cool again. We need to think of ways to make climate cool. Athletes, entertainers, they've been on the sidelines. I'd like to see a climate mitigation ad by LeBron James. I think we need we tend to make this an elite issue, and I think we need to think of ways to make climate cool again. Now I have to tell you, partly because of my experience covering a very brutal conflict in the Middle East, when I wrote Hot, Flat, and Crowded, I did explain that I'm actually not a nice green. I'm a mean green. And I believe in mean green. That is, we are not up against nice people. We're up against oil, gas, and coal companies. They're actually not on Facebook. They're actually not in the chat room. They're actually in the cloakroom of the US Congress and every state legislature with bags of money. So you need to get out of Facebook and into somebody's face. You need to be a mean green. I'm a huge, and always have been, fan of Greenpeace. I love the crazy shit they do, okay? Because they are mean greens. They get out and they embarrass people and they call them out. I think that is really, really, really important. I meet too many young people who I say, they're passionate about this and say, what did you do about it? They say, I tweeted about it. I say, you tweeted about it? That's like firing a mortar into the Milky Way galaxy, okay? You gotta get, this will not be won online, folks. It'll be, Greta Thunberg understood that. You gotta get millions of people in the streets, let politicians espy them, and realize that they got to make a change or it's going to cost them their jobs. That's the only way it changes, okay? You have to move the cheese. You move the cheese, you move the mouse. You don't move the cheese, the mouse doesn't move. And the cheese is votes and money to get reelected. That's what the bad guys are doing. And if we are not mean greens and think that just nice persuasion and a little Twitter will move these people, it won't. So take a page out of the Greenpeace. Lastly, what I've tried to do, in 2008, I coined a phrase, Green New Deal. You may have heard of it lately. My idea of a Green New Deal then, which Obama then picked up, it was that I don't think we need to make this issue also aspirational, but big aspiration. And that's why I called for not a space race, we need an Earth race. Who will lead the Earth race to invent the clean, green technologies so men, women, people of all races and nations and faiths can live here sustainably on Earth? That's the race we need. That's what I'd love to see someone running in this election be for. I want Medicare for all, I want Social Security for all, I want healthcare for all. I get all that. But I think it's the environment, stupid. And I think people are starved for a big, bold, aspirational idea that will make America, okay, a country that is the moral leader again, the health leader again, the innovative leader again, the security leader again. You can wrap all of this around national renewal. And that was the whole idea for me of a Green New Deal. It was the way to revive the country around a huge aspirational project. The last thing I would say is that if we're going to have a strategy for climate change that is propulsive and resilient, it also requires an ethic of conservation. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone, of kind of turning this into an efficiency issue, a mileage issue, a carbon-free issue. But if there isn't an ethic of conservation, once I've got a electric Hummer, well, then I have a license to drive it through the Amazon. Actually, you don't, And I think it's really important that we always remind people that nature is a good in and of itself. It is also part of God's great creation as we are. And without nature, poets will have nothing to poet about, songwriters will have nothing to songwrite about, and we will be less human. And I think reminding people that nature in and of itself, not because it gives us clean water, just not because it filters, the ocean, not because its mangroves give us resistance to higher seas, but nature in and of itself is a huge, valuable ethic and responsibility, because if we don't have that, boy, when people have that electric Hummer, they're going to drive it right through the Amazon. So that's my sort of general view of how you get resilience and propulsion around the whole agenda of mitigating climate change. Let me talk about a couple of other areas because they're related. And again, this is all from my last book. Thank you for being late. How do you get resilience and propulsion around community today? Around community. Really, really important. I spent a lot of time in the last couple of years visiting small towns in America, because the cliche about America today is that we're a country divided between two coasts that are liberalizing, pluralizing, globalizing, and diversifying. And then there's flyover America, where everyone's supposedly high on opioids, voted for Trump, and waiting for 1950 to come back, okay? So that's the cliche about America today. Well, I happen to be from flyover America. I happen to be from a small town outside of Minneapolis called St. Louis Park. And so I happen to know that ain't true. The real story of America today, and I say this to TNC group because you are so embedded in community, is that the country today is actually a checkerboard of communities that are rising from the bottom up and communities actually that are collapsing from the bottom down. Oh, those opioid and suicide stories and unemployment stories are very true. So what the journey I've been on is try to understand what enables one community to rise, to develop resilience and propulsion in the middle of these three climate changes at once, in technology, globalization, and the climate, and why does another fall? So I'll give you just a little insight into that from my last trip to a community. It was actually to a town called Wilmer, Minnesota. Wilmer, Minnesota. Wilmer is about 2 hours west of the Twin Cities, about halfway to the Dakota border. I happen to be quite knowledgeable about Wilmer because in 1949, my aunt and uncle, after the war, moved there and started a little steel company in Wilmer, which is sort of the capital of West Central Minnesota. And I visited Wilmer for 50 years, every summer and every winter to see my aunt and uncle. Well, I remembered that back in about Wilmer, I should say when my aunt and uncle moved there, excuse me, in 1949 was 99.9% white, Protestant, Lutheran, German, and Scandinavian, and 3 Jewish families, one of whom was my aunt and uncle. Jews in Minnesota, we called ourselves the Frozen Chosen, and they moved out there to Wilmer. And but in 1975, my aunt came down to the Twin Cities for a family event, and she pulled me aside and said, Tom, I was in the grocery store last weekend, and I heard someone speaking Spanish. Spanish. It could have been Martian for her, you know. And it was her first real encounter with the other, which is why I never forgot it. Well, my aunt and uncle passed away about 10 years ago, and last year, 6 months ago, a woman, Dana Mortensen, who runs a wonderful NGO called Rural Savvy, came to see me in my office in Washington, and she happened to mention in passing that she was working in Wilmer with their NGO. And I said, you know, stop. I told her my whole story about Wilmer. I said, look, I'll do you a deal. I'll give you a free lecture if you will set up a day of interviews for me in Wilmer. 'Cause I always wondered, whatever happened to Wilmer? So we agreed on that deal. We went out to Wilmer. This was last May. And our first stop was Wilmer High. And in the lobby, they have a giant steel world map over the lobby. And the principal who met us explained that the incoming class every year actually takes out a ladder and climbs up to the world map, and they put pins in all the places Wilmer High students are from, because Wilmer today is almost 50% Somali and Latino. This is a town that in the 50s and 60s was basically a white town with 3 Jews as the aliens. So it's actually quite a remarkable story. And that steel map was donated by the people who bought my aunt and uncle's steel company. So how do they do it? Because Wilmer's actually working, oh, they have problems, they have issues, all these towns do. But what do the towns that are working, building resilience and propulsion today have in common? First is a sense of urgency. Now, the urgency can come from many things. It can come from the factory moving. In Wilmer's case, it comes from the fact that they have 0 unemployment. 0 unemployment. If you can fog up a mirror today, you can get a job in Wilmer, Minnesota, as an ag scientist or at the Jennie-O turkey factory, by the way, across the whole spectrum. So they desperately needed labor. And what do you learn in Wilmer? The first thing you learn is that necessity isn't just the mother of invention, it's the mother of inclusion. because when employers there needed labor, they didn't care whether you were tall, short, gay or straight, black, white, whatever. All they cared about were your soft skills. Would you wake up, dress up, clean up, show up, sit up, learn up, and shut up? And if you did that, you got a job in Wilmer, Minnesota today. So that burst through all the racial, religious fears of the other. That's how it started. Second, Wilmer had a high density of leaders without authority. Leaders without authority, they're really important. They're important at TNC, and they're critical to any rising community. These are people in the community who step up and simply say, not going to happen in my town. We're not going under. Not going to happen in my town. First Ramadan, the Somalis had nowhere to pray because there was no mosque, and the fire chief gave them the fire station. People in the community, some are not happy. Somebody threw a pig's foot at a Somali woman. He said, too bad, going to happen. They're going to pray in the fire station. Leaders without authority are so important in every community. Third thing they all have in common is these leaders without authority all network together and create what I call complex adaptive coalitions. Oh, where have I heard that term before? Mother Nature, complex adaptive networks. They create complex adaptive coalitions to maximize their resilience and propulsion. What do these look like? It's where the business community partners with the education community, partners with the philanthropic community, partners with the social entrepreneur community, partners with the city government. They create a coalition to manage their way through the climate change. And that's why every one of these successful towns I visited, Red Wing, Lancaster, Louisville, they all have something called Wilmer 2040. They all have a long-term plan for building resilience and propulsion in the middle of these climate changes. And the first rule of these complex adaptive coalitions is that when you come into the room, you see that hook outside the door, you check your politics on that hook. Because in this room, our politics is called what works. Where have you heard that before? Mother Nature, hybrid, heterodox, always experimental. So all they're doing actually is mirroring all the strategies of Mother Nature. We can talk about that a little more during the Q&A as well. Let me quickly do the last two, and then we'll break for the discussion. I think this is a very important one because you're seeing it in the world today. How are these three climate changes now affecting countries? So basically, I think we always have to remember that for millennia, the world was actually governed by empires. The Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, you know them all. That's how we govern the world, is through giant empires. Only in the 20th century did we really begin to break up internationally into nation states as a result of decolonization and the end of World War I and World War II, so much so that we woke up in 1945 and discovered we had like 190 countries in the United Nations. We've never had that before. Now, the 50 years after World War II were a fantastic time to be a weak little country. If you were a weak country, oh, that was your era. Why? First of all, there were two superpowers out there, sending money to you, throwing money, foreign aid at you, sending wheat to you, educating your kids at Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow, Wichita State in America, building your government house, building your stadium, building your army. You could be Syria and lose 3 wars to Israel and get your army rebuilt for free, all 3 times. Two superpowers competing for your affection on a global chessboard. Second, climate change was very moderate. Third, populations were really under control. Fourth, no one had one of these to compare their leader or their country or their village to the valley next door, let alone across the ocean. And lastly, China was not in the World Trade Organization, so everybody could be in the textile business. Everybody could have low-wage industries. Now, my argument is that in the age of my 3 accelerations, all of this flips. Now, no country wants to touch you because all they win is a bill. Russia and Syria is a minor exception, but all they're really doing there is sending some military aid. Nobody wants to touch you now because all they win is a bill. Number 2, climate change is now hammering these countries. I did a documentary 2 years ago for National Geographic on climate refugees in Africa. We started in Senegal. Senegal today is already at 2 degrees rise average temperature since the Industrial Revolution. 2 degrees rise average temperature. Where have I heard that number? Oh, that's what the Paris Climate Agreement was designed to prevent by 2100. Senegal is already there. They're heading for 4 degrees. Populations have now exploded. I was in Niger as part of that trip. Average woman in Niger has 7.3 children. We interviewed many people with 12 and 13 children, so populations are exploding. Now everyone's got one of these, and it also has a human trafficking app on it, so I can figure out how to get out of here. And lastly, China is in the World Trade Organization, so nobody can be in the textile business. I pointed out on that trip, I was in Tahrir Square for the revolution in Egypt back in 2011. And I was there for 3 weeks. And after my time there, when things settled down, I went home. I was at Cairo Airport, waiting to go home, been away from my wife for three weeks. I went into the Treasure of Egypt souvenir shop to buy my little honey, something to remind her where her honey had been for 3 weeks. Let's see, what do they have here? Pyramids, ashtrays. Now my honey doesn't smoke. A Sphinx bookends. My honey has plenty of bookends. Oh, what's this? It's a stuffed camel. And when you squeezed its hump, it honked. And my honey didn't have a honking humped camel. So I picked it up, turned it over, and what did it say on the bottom? Made in China. Yeah, you're the lowest wage country in the Eastern Mediterranean. There's now a country half a world away can make your honking humped camel cheaper than you can ship it and make a profit. Now, the net result of all of these things is it's undermining the resilience of a lot of countries today. And the ones that are most vulnerable are those whose borders are all straight lines because they're the most artificial. And we've cracked up some of them ourselves, and others are cracking up on their own. And what they're doing now is hemorrhaging people. And that's why we have more people on the road in the world today than any time since World War II. And you're seeing a mass movement of people trying to get out of these countries of disorder into the world of order. In our hemisphere, it's been happening from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador primarily. In Europe, it's happening from the Sahel, North Africa, and the Levant. And when climate change hits, even more intensely, this mass movement is going to be a flood. And there is no Mediterranean deep or wide enough to stop it. So how we think about making these countries more resilient now, to me, should be the #1 foreign policy question. Let me conclude with the question of ethics and resilience and propulsion, because I think we need to think about ethics a lot differently today. And it's really important, I think, for your mission here. So this chapter in my book is called, Is God in Cyberspace? Is God in cyberspace? Best question I ever got on book tour. 1999, I'm in Portland, Oregon at the Portland Theater. I'm selling a book, Lexus and the Olive Tree. A young man at question time, way up in the balcony, raises his hand. Mr. Friedman, I have a question. Is God in cyberspace? I said, I have no idea. I felt like a complete idiot. So I got home, I called my spiritual teacher. He's a rabbi I got to know when I was the New York Times correspondent in Jerusalem, Zvi Marx, brilliant Talmudic scholar, now lives in Amsterdam, married to a Dutch priest, interesting character. I tracked him down in Amsterdam. I said, Zvi, I got a question I have never had before. Is God in cyberspace? What should I have said? He said, well, Tom, in our faith tradition, we actually have 2 concepts of the Almighty. We have a biblical concept and we have a post-biblical concept. Now, the biblical concept says the Almighty is almighty. He smites evil and rewards good. And if that's your view of God, he sure isn't in cyberspace, which is full of pornography, gambling, cheating, lying, prevarication, fake news, and Russian bots. But fortunately, he said, we have a post-biblical view of God. And the post-biblical view of God says God manifests himself by how we behave. So if we want God to be in cyberspace, we have to bring him there by how we behave there. Only we can bring God into cyberspace. I really liked his answer. I put it in the paperback edition of Lexis Neolatry in 2020, in 2000, and where none of you saw it. And I sat there for 16 years. So when I sat down to write my last book, I actually found myself suddenly retelling the story. And so I sat myself down and said, why are you retelling this story? And the answer quickly became apparent to me. It's for two reasons. One just happened. The one that just happened is I believe that we have begun in the developed world, certainly, and increasingly in the developing world, we've begun to live 51% of our lives in cyberspace. Yeah, that's where you go now to find a date, find a spouse, do your brokerage, do your banking, write a book, sell a book, find a book, get your news, generate your news, buy a car, sell a house. That's actually where you're living now, 51% of your life. And what's my definition of cyberspace? It's a realm where we're all connected, but no one's in charge. We're all connected there, but no one's in charge. There's no stoplights in cyberspace. No stop signs, no courts, no police, no 1-800, please stop Putin from hacking my election. But that's where you're living more than half your life now and growing. In other words, you're living more than half your life in a realm that is fundamentally God and ethics free. And at the same time, because of my three accelerations, we're now standing at a moral intersection no member of the human species has ever stood at before. In 1945, we entered a world where one country, post-Hiroshima, one country could kill all of us, the United States of America. I think we're entering a world now where one person can kill all of us. And at the same time, where all of us could actually fix everything. These same accelerating powers are creating a world where one of us can kill all of us. And all of us, if we actually put our minds to it now, we actually have the power and connectivity to feed, house, clothe, educate, and protect every person on the planet if we put our mind to it. We've actually never been here before where one of us could kill all of us and all of us could fix everything. And what is this place? We've never been more godlike as a species than we are today. We'll put those two together. You've never lived your life in a realm more God-free, and we have never been more godlike. And what does that mean? It means what every single person thinks, feels, and believes really matters. It means every person on the planet needs to be in the grip of TNC sustainable values, okay? And at a minimum, the golden rule. Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. Every faith and culture has their version of it because more people can now do unto you farther, faster, deeper, cheaper than ever before. And you can do unto others farther, faster, deeper, cheaper than ever before. I know what you're thinking. I gave this part of my lecture actually as a graduation address at Olin College of Engineering a couple of years ago. And I said to the parents there, I know what you're thinking. You paid $200 grand so your kid could get an engineering degree. And who do they bring in as the commencement speaker? But a knucklehead promoting the golden rule. Is there anything more naive? And what I told them is what I will tell you. In this age of acceleration, naivete is the new realism. Because I'll tell you what's really naive. Thinking we're going to be okay when men, women, machines get this interconnected and super empowered, if everyone is not in the embrace of sustainable values and an ethic of conservation. Where do you learn those things? The golden rule? I think in two places: strong families and healthy communities. I'm not an expert on strong families, hope I built one, but would never dare lecture anyone on that subject. But I am an expert on healthy communities, and that's why I've spent so much time following them in this country, trying to understand how they work. And that's why my book actually ends in the town I grew up in, where I learned the golden rule. And that's why my talk and my book actually close with a theme song. I have a theme song. I actually explored whether I could buy the song. So when you opened the book, you would play this song like a Hallmark card plays Happy Birthday. And the song is by one of my favorite singers, Brandi Carlile. And she's got a song called the I-E-Y-E that I think is the anthem of our time. The main refrain is, I wrapped your love around me like a chain, but I never was afraid that it would die. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. You can dance in a hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. Friends, my 3 accelerations, they are a hurricane. We have leaders all over the world trying to build a wall to the hurricane. What I'm arguing for is actually building an eye, the healthy community. An eye that moves with the storm, draws energy from it, but creates a platform of dynamic stability, like riding a bike, where people can feel connected, protected, and respected. I believe the great struggle in politics going forward is going to be between the wall people and the eye people. And my book is a manifesto for the eye people. Thank you very much. Thank you.